So nice, thanks to the housekeeping matters we've been attending to, you've had a bit longer to consider your position than you thought you had. Are you ready to commence your re-examination?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Blow, you were cross-examined rather extensively about the radio communication, the warning that Mr. Lowe gave on the Sunday, on the 12th of August 2012. And you testified that it's a real-time communication.
Yes, Chair.
And I understood your evidence to be that meant that anybody else who had access to a lineman security radio would have heard it at the same time as what the security centre heard the communication. Can you just confirm that?
Correct, I confirm that, Chair.
So similarly, when Mr. Lowe then radios in a bit later and he says, and he warns lineman security not to confront the strikers, would anybody who had access to a lineman security radio also have heard that warning?
In real time, yes, Chair.
Without the security centre having to relay that warning back to them?
Chairperson, that is not standard practice because they will be jamming the communication. So yes, without them relaying it.
Everybody have his security radio on all the time?
Yes, Chairperson.
You talk about those who have access to the radio, but does everybody listen to the security radio all the time?
Yes, Chairperson.
24/7?
Yes, Chairperson.
And where are these security radios normally kept? Are they kept on one's person or are they kept in the vehicle?
Both, Chairperson. We've got base stations in radios and handheld radios on the person.
Now, we're specifically dealing with Mr. Fundi and Mr. Mabelani. Do you know whether they would have had a handheld radio on their person or whether they would have had a radio in their motor vehicle?
Chairperson, I would know of a radio in the motor vehicle. I would not be 100% sure if they had a radio on the person.
So in other words, if they had been out of their motor vehicle already at the time that Mr. Lowe issued the warning not to confront the strikers, would they have heard that warning?
If they were a distance from the vehicle's Chairperson, they would have not heard it.
And would it similarly flow from that even if Radio Control Centre had sent another warning to them over the radio, they wouldn't have heard that warning either if they'd been out of their vehicle?
Correct, Chairperson.
Now, you were present on the Monday near the railway line.
Yes.
I'd please ask if we could just please look at Exhibit Z1, and if we could go to about 23 minutes, please. Now, if we could just go to 23. I want the part where they're marching around the corner, when they're moving around the corner, please. If you could stop there, please.
3:14.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Now, did you see this, Mr. Blow? The strikers marching around the corner like this?
Chairperson, is this now...
On the Monday?
Yes, I saw the strikers marching, yes.
Right. Here they're marching around the corner. I thought you were in Nyala near the railway line.
I just need to confirm, is this now before they were addressed by General Mpembe or afterwards?
No, after they were addressed by General Mpembe, he started to count to 10. When he got to 3, they got up and walked away.
I saw that,
in
yes.
the direction of the Kopi. And in proceeding, as they were,
yes,
they came past this rock here, this corner, as Mr. Van As describes it.
Yes, Chairperson.
Now, when that happened, you were in Nyala near the railway line. Is that right?
No, when they started walking away, we were all still at the place where they had congregated. We drove away as they were walking away.
Be that as it may, you testified in cross-examination that you were scared and uncomfortable about the situation.
Correct, Chairperson.
Now, you saw these strikers moving forward in a crouching formation on that day, did you not?
Correct, I did, Chairperson.
Now, the evidence before the Commission is that was from Lonman Securities, that is a similar position that they adopted on the Sunday when they approached Lonman Security.
Yes.
Now, did you view, when you saw them on the Monday, did you view them as adopting a threatening and aggressive approach?
Correct, Chairperson.
Now, you know the late Mr. Fundi and the late Mr. Mabelani, don't you? You've worked with them for a number of years.
Yes, Chair.
Can it conceivably be concluded that Mr. Fundi and Mr. Mabelani would have formed any other view as to the danger posed by these individuals moving forward in a crouching position, heavily armed with pangas and machetes and spears?
Chairperson, can you just reformulate your question?
Do you believe that Mr. Fundi and Mr. Mabelani would similarly have viewed the strikers as posing a danger when they approached them in that sort of formation?
Chairperson, I believe they would, because the other security members with them had the same view as well.
And then, do you know why Lonman Security went to the Wonderkop Hostel on that day? Let me perhaps frame the question in more detail. Was it in order to protect NUM's officers, or was it in order to assist Mr. Lowe and Mr. Foster?
Mr. Chairperson, as far as I can remember, it was to protect the NUM office.
Is that why they went there?
Yes,
Is that why they formed the formation there?
that is correct.
Right. Now, would they have known whether the NUM office was occupied or not at that stage?
I am not 100% sure, Chairperson.
Is it normally occupied on a Sunday morning?
Normally on Sundays it is closed, Chair.
Did you know whether the NUM, by you I mean you and your colleague,
Yes.
know that if this is so, I'm not sure it is so, but putting it on the basis it may be, did you know whether the NUM officials had gone into hiding already on the Sunday morning?
Yes,
There is evidence they went into hiding, remember?
yes, we knew that. Yes,
And
Chair.
they'd already gone into hiding by the Sunday morning.
Yes, Chair, we knew that.
So the purpose of forming the line would be for no other reason other than to protect property, not lives.
Correct, Chairperson.
And what did you advise Mr. Fundi and Mr. Mabelani in relation to Lonman, the value of Lonman property? So I see there's a...
Rampera, you've got to turn your light on.
Yes. I'm just objecting to a question to the effect that Mr. Lowe warned the security not to approach the crowd, because I've just looked at his statement and we went through the transcript, and I don't see any
All right.
such warning be made that Lowe said security should not approach the crowd.
What's your response to the objection?
So it would be misrepresentation.
Well, no, misrepresentation may be a wrong question. What is your response to the question?
Would it make my case significantly easier if Mr. Lowe hadn't issued such a warning? My understanding of the evidence is he testified that he had in fact radioed in and told and issued a warning that that Lonman Security shouldn't approach the strikers because they were armed and dangerous.
We remember that. It may not be in the statement, but that's our recollection. It may be incorrect, but it is our recollection of what he said in his oral evidence. So I overrule the objections from him.
We will have to check that, Chair, because
on
I'm
the
going through the
basis-
transcript and I don't see that. The only thing is that he asked for replenishment.
Yes. Anyway, I'll allow the question to be asked on the basis that if it turns out that our recollection is incorrect, then the answers he gives now will be affected by that.
Then you were also cross-examined rather extensively in relation to scenario planning.
Correct, Chair.
And my learned friend, Ms. Baloy, used the word that Lonman Security were blindsided. Do you recall that? Do you recall that being put to you? By what happened on the Sunday?
I'm not recalling it.
Either as it may.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that Lonman Security were in fact blindsided in that on the Sunday there was a decoy attack at EPL and that diverted most of Lonman Security? Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of that, Chair.
And thereafter the real attack on the NUM office at Wonderkop Hostel.
Yes.
Rather a sophisticated strategy, is it not, on the part of the strikers?
A well-coordinated strategy, yes.
In my limited time, if one has a look at a history lesson, very similar to the strategy that the Zulus adopted at Isandlwana.
We won't go into 19th century military
Thank-
history.
the
I'll
point-
give you a little bit more time because Advocate Hemraj and I took up a bit of your time,
Thank you.
which it would not be fair to debit you with.
The point I'm making is it's a sophisticated paramilitary strategy that was used by the strikers on the Sunday.
Yes, Chair.
Have you ever experienced something similar to that at Lonman?
Chairperson, no. We have never. That was the first time that we had seen such determination and armed people assuming paramilitary tactics. Yes.
Was there any reason for you to factor that into your scenario planning before the Sunday morning?
Chairperson, no. What we worked on is historical events that had informed us of how best to counter industrial action.
And let's move on to your telephone conversation.
The telephone conversation, I'd like to ask something about what you've just asked. The information that you had, according to passages I read from the ICAM report, was that they were planning for war. Had you ever encountered a situation where workers, strikers, were, according to the information, which was apparently regarded as potentially reliable,
Yes.
you ever had a situation before where, according to your information, the strikers were planning for war?
Never, Chairperson.
You say in your statement that you spoke to General Mbombo on the Friday.
Yes,
That doesn't appear in your telephone records.
that is correct.
It's also common cause that you spoke to General Mbombe on the Sunday.
Yes,
Is it General Mpembe or
Sorry,
General
sir,
Mbombo?
General Mbombo. Sorry. You spoke to General Mbombo on the Sunday.
yes.
That also doesn't appear in your telephone records.
That's my observation, Chairperson.
Is it possible that you would have used another telephone or cell phone to make these calls to General Mbombo?
It's very possible, Chairperson.
Was there an increase in police presence after the murders of Mr. Fundi and Mr. Mabelani?
No, Chairperson.
Did Lonman expect a significant increase in police presence after that?
We did, Chairperson.
Did you believe it was necessary for you to actually spell out to the police that more police need to arrive here after two people had been brutally hacked to death on your premises?
Chairperson, correct, because we had limitations on where to operate, and we needed the police presence to assist us with public violence, as well as there were breaches of a lot of statutes, and that, to my recollection, is a function of the South African Police Services.
You've also cross-examined about the fact that you held a meeting with NUM on the Saturday.
Yes.
If one has regard to the documentation, you also undertook to hold a meeting with AMCU about the security situation.
Correct.
Was that meeting held?
I know a meeting with MCU was held at the LPD offices, but I do not remember a meeting with MCU at the Middelkraal offices.
And then if we could please have exhibit quadruple L2 on the screen. This is the statement of Captain Govender where he makes reference to going to the copy and seeing strikers performing rituals and making ready for war. I think he used the word to use. Either commit crimes or engage in faction fighting. Was that information communicated to Lonman by the police?
Chairperson, we had a meeting with Captain Govender in one of the, in fact, on the afternoon at 2 o'clock. We did hear about the rituals that were performed from members of the SAPS, I'm sure it would have been Captain Govender.
Now, did the police advise Lonman to place additional security at the NUM office because they were anticipating some sort of second attack on the NUM office?
Chairperson, not as far as I can remember.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Manas. You want to ask you? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Blow. You'll be excused. On the usual basis that if it's necessary for us to get you back, we won't have to subpoena you. You'll come back when we ask you to do so.
Thank you,
You're prepared
Chairperson.
to give that undertaking?
That is correct.
Yes, you're excused.
Thanks.
Thank you. Is Mr. Sinclair available to continue with his evidence?
He's outside. If we could just call him in, please, Mr. Chairperson.
Ms. Beloya, you will continue the cross-examination of Mr.
Yes,
Sinclair.
Chair.
Chair, if I could perhaps at this stage just highlight where we stand at this with the cross-examination that's remaining of Mr. Sinclair, because there has been a change. The SAPS have got 60 minutes left. NUM and Mrs. Fundi have 30 minutes left. Then AMCU have got an hour and a half. The families were then going to also have an hour and a half, but they've indicated they have no cross-examination for Mr. Sinclair.
Mr. Goss?
Chair, having regard to the concessions that Mr. Sinclair has already given and the evidence of other witnesses since him, it is not necessary for AMCU to cross-examine Mr. Sinclair. So,
Thank you, Mr. Goss. I'm grateful to you for communicating that to me now. Mr. Sinclair, I think I better swear you in again because you've been out of the country since you were last testified. Will you swear that the continued evidence you give in this matter before the Commission will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Please raise your right hand and say, I swear so help me God. Thank you. You may be seated. You can keep your jacket on or take it off, whichever makes you feel the most comfortable. You may be seated. Now, when you were here last time, we asked you about some documents. You remember? Have you been able to find the documents?
Mr. Chair, if I can just please recall which documents, because I was a little bit confused. I didn't get a list of what I had to find. I looked through the things. I think the documents that I was required to find, if I can recall correctly, were the sheets that were required, the deployment sheets that were in the control room, and then, if I recall, it was the deployment of Protea coin. I think that was the other one that I was required to. And I don't recall which of the other ones that I was required to.
Are the ones you've mentioned now, those are the only ones you brought?
Those are the ones. When I was, and I needed to be careful about. I didn't go to Middle Kraal to go and look for them myself. I went through Mike DeCosta and asked him to trace them, obviously to stay within the rules. And I recall, Mr. Chairman, that the deployment sheets, the initial deployment sheets that we used in the control room, where we would put them on the walls with the plans and everything, we would use handwritten ones. They were not in a substantial typed up form or that. Those, I believe, the team did try and find whether they had been put away somewhere, and they weren't able to find those. What they did find is the ones that came a little bit later, because that operation obviously went on for quite a while. So I have an example of that type of deployment sheet that we handwritten, that we haven't been able to find exactly who was on it and who was deployed. I have an example of the later ones that were typed up. I've been able to find that. And then as regard to the Protea coin deployments, if I recall correctly, may I just look at something quickly, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. If I recall correctly, it has been submitted to me by the Lonman legal team. It's in the bundle that I was given. I don't know if that is here or how the process works, but it's in there with the Protea coin. Their deployment sheets, I have also been given an example, for instance, that specifies, not of the deployment sheets for the Protea coin on duty, but for instance, what we were asking for with the additional hard skin vehicles and those type of things. I've been able to find those, Mr. Chair.
Well, when we take the next adjournment, you can hand them to Mr. Wesley, and we will then take the matter further if necessary. Were you not given a list by the evidence leaders when you left of the documents that you were asked to bring?
Mr. Chair, I did ask for that before we left, and I have not been, unless it's come to me, but I have not been got it that it was this, this, and this, unless I have missed it. But I don't believe I have, and I tried to go through, I have read through the scripts to see what was required, and I've tried to stay as close to that as possible. So.
All right. Well, we won't take it any further at this stage. Ms. Beloy, you're cross-examining the witness.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Sinclair.
Good morning, sir.
Mr. Sinclair, if we could look at exhibit quadruple F6. Yes, this document here. And specifically, I'm looking at your report of the 10th of August, which is page 268 at the top.
(268) you say, Ms. Beloy?
Yeah. Yes, this one. Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Sinclair, this is a report from you. Do you confirm that?
Yes.
And to whom is this directed?
It is a report through to Mr. Frank. Is this the one of the four, the briefs? Yes. It is a report that I produced to send through to Mr. Frank Rasabello, who was my direct report, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Now, and this.
Yes, I tied that up on, I think I finished it that evening.
Now, if you look at paragraph 2 of that document, it records what information you have at this point when you write this report. You say conflicting information subsequently emerged. 1A being no employees would be permitted to work across Lonmin and access to bus transport would be denied. And then B, employees would be permitted to work Friday night shift and Saturday day shift, but work would be disrupted on Monday. You see that?
I see that, Mr. Chair.
So this is about the information of what to expect in the following days. Am I correct?
That was information that had been filtering through from various sources, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Now, if you go to the next page of this document and you look at item 20, you say there, indications are that employees will not be reporting for work on Saturday, 11th August 2012. You see that?
I see that.
Am I correct? This sums up what your expectation is, Lonmin's expectation is about what will happen on the 11th, which is the Saturday.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if it was our expectations. That was information coming to us that we were saying this is the information we are receiving. Whether it was our expectations, I cannot say that, but this was the information that was filtering through, and we were trying to make sense of what information was coming through.
Now, if you had received any other information specifically that the strikers would be marching to the offices of the NUM to confront the NUM, if you received such information, it would have been contained in this report, I would expect.
Mr. Chairman, I think this report was concluded at about 11 o'clock that evening, and I think if I had had that information, I certainly would have included it in this brief to Mr. Frank Rosabella.
Yes. Now, moving on to something else. I would like to discuss with you about your CCTV footage. And unless you need me to call up videos, I don't propose to do that. I'll just talk you through what the evidence has been and indicate if you would like to see any footage at all. We know from the evidence of Mr. Boetes, amongst others, but also statements of Mr. Blow and Mr. Boetes, that the incident of the 11th of August, the confrontation between the strikers and members of the NUM, that was not covered on CCTV, on Lonmin CCTV. You're aware of that?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Could you just say the evidence of Mr. Boetes, what?
And the statement, a statement deposed to by Mr. Blow. Okay? From that, we have been told that the incident of 11th August, where was a confrontation between the strikers and the NUM, was not covered or recorded on CCTV. You're aware of that?
I am aware that there was that we were not able to find footage of that confrontation in the road past Vonnegut Stadium down towards the bus station. We weren't able to find CCTV footage of that, and I don't think they have been able to find CCTV footage.
Yes.
Am I correct in thinking after you get to the bus stop, you actually have to turn the corner to come to the police satellite station and the NUM office?
If you're going from Vonnegut Stadium down towards the bus stop, when you get to the T-junction, you turn left to the NUM offices and right to the hospital, sir.
Is there no footage available as to what happened near the NUM office? You said there wasn't footage from the Vonnegut Stadium to the bus stop, but from the bus stop to the NUM office. Is there no footage available for that either?
So, Mr. Chair, we have 2 or 3 cameras. I can't remember exactly, but I know there's 2 or 3 cameras. One critical camera is close to the bus stop it's one of those cameras, I forget whether that can go all the way around. That can see the NUM offices, it can see the houses, it can see down towards the hospital, and then back up towards the road. However, there were trees on that one. I know that when I looked at other footage there were trees on that one. There's another one up towards the workshop area, halfway up where the kitchen is in Vonnegut. That one was there, and there's one at the offices at the technical offices. I think those are the 3 in that area. They are all on the same system. Does that answer your question?
No, not answer my question. You told us there's no footage available from the Vonnegut Stadium to the bus stop. I want to know, is there any footage available from the bus stop through to the NUM office?
I haven't been able to find any footage, and I believe that the technical team have looked, and I believe they haven't been able to find on that particular day, but I stand corrected whether they have been able to subsequently find it.
Thank you.
Mr. Blow, I'm trying to find this, I beg your pardon, Mr. Sinclair, I'm trying to find the statement from Mr. Blow. Mr. Blow, in one of his statements, in fact, says the camera that would have captured that scene or that incident, that area, was not working on the day. Does that accord with what you know?
Mr. Chair, I would believe that that was correct, that there was obviously a technical issue with that camera on that day, because I would have gone back that afternoon and said, guys, review for me. I definitely would have asked for a review that afternoon. Not that I can recall doing it at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, but I would have gone back, because that's one thing that I was fairly systematic about. And there was, and to the best of my knowledge, I could find no footage. So I don't believe that any of those cameras were working on that particular day, sir.
And the incident of the 12th, where the two Lonmin security were attacked, that too, there is no footage of that attack on the security.
I believe there is footage of that from the camera that I explained that was at the bus stop that could go from the NUM offices all the way around. There is definitely footage, because I have personally seen that footage. And I've looked at that footage 2 or 3 times. So there is definitely footage on the Sunday the 12th.
Well, Mr. Sinclair, I think you may be referring to different footage from what I'm asking you. I'm asking you about the attack itself, as it is happening when Mr. Fundi is attacked and when Mr. Mabelane is attacked. I'm asking you about that particular footage.
There is footage. There is footage. You cannot see the actual attack, because there are, if I recall correctly, and I haven't looked at it for at least 2 years, but Mr. Chair, there is definitely footage of the movement of those people that I recall. There is footage, and I think it's behind the tree, if I recall correctly, of smoke coming out. There is footage of the people that are there moving into the roadway that turns to NUM. So there is, and I can't remember all the details. As I say, I haven't looked at that footage for a long time, but there is definitely footage of that. The attack, I can't recall how clear that footage is, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
But I'm sure it must be, I think it has been given to you, I'm not sure.
Yes. Mr. Sinclair, just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, could we have exhibit L33 shown on the screen? This is a shot from Lonmin CCTV, and I want to see if this is what you may be referring to or something different. Does this mean anything to you, Mr. Sinclair?
That one is a bit difficult. If I could see a short clip of the video, I would tell you I cannot. Okay. I think that is the same video, Mr. Chairman, because the shot at the bottom, I remember saying, "What is that is going on there?" when I was doing a review on that. So I believe that this is from the same footage that I am talking about.
Yes.
It's about 15 minutes long, if I recall correctly, Mr. Chair.
Chairperson, I'm told it might be helpful if I ask for Y1, video Y1 to be shown.
Right, do that.
This,
Is this the relevant?
I believe this is the same one. That's where that still photograph was taken of that group there, if I recall correctly.
And do you know, is this before or after the attack on security?
If you follow this video through, I think it's the same video that you will see go back, and you will see smoke starting to rise from where the tree is.
And you say
So I think it's a continuous video, and it's all the same video, if I recall correctly, Mr. Chair.
Yes. And you say from this video you actually are not able to see the attack as it happens at the time that they're being attacked, the two security.
If I, as I say, it was a long time. If the video goes back to where the tree is, and you can see the smoke starting.
Okay. Could we please go back on the video to the beginning?
And I think if I recall, it might be off. It comes down. Chair, I think if I could just help, I think it's a bit beyond that it takes place. It takes quite a lot of those people go onto the road, and then it comes back to that tree, and you can see the smoke through the tree and that you can see now. You can see the smoke starting there, but it's a little while after this, sir, if I recall correctly.
Chair, I'm happy to stop here to try and make the point that I'm trying to make with this.
135 at the moment, but we haven't seen much for the last few seconds.
Yes.
So make your point.
I'll try and do that, Chair. Mr. Sinclair, what I'm trying to establish with you is that from this footage, you're unable to identify the persons that were involved in the attack on Mr. Fundi and Mr. Mabelani. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. Through that, we were not able to see where. We could only see the tree and the smoke. We could not see people or identify people from that, sir.
And the same for the damage to property, vehicles of Lonmin.
We could not see that either through this camera with that footage, Mr. Chair.
Now, the earlier clip, which is Exhibit L33 that we started out with, if we could go back to that, or in fact pick it up on this video, that's fine. Now, on this as well, which is part of the clip that we've been looking at, was Lonmin able to identify any of the people that are found in this clip?
Mr. Chairman, to the best of my knowledge, through our investigations, but remember, this has become a police investigation, so we were very careful to not infringe on that. From just our looking, we were not able, to the best of my knowledge, able to identify anybody in either of those groups. But I do stand corrected on that.
Yes. And you have another attack on the evening of the 12th. This is the attack where Mr. Mabebe was attacked and killed. Now, we have, I think, the evidence of Mr. Buertes, who explained, no, I'm sorry, yes, I think it's Mr. Buertes, who explains also that the cameras could not pick up that incident in the, I think it's described as in the car park. You're aware of that?
I don't recall. I would have had a brief look at those, but I don't recall the details of that CCTV footage as I sit here right now, sir.
Okay. Now, maybe let me ask you this way. As you sit there right now, do you know whether Lonmin has been able to identify any of the people that were, from CCTV footage, whether Lonmin has been able to identify any of the people that were involved in the incident with Mr. Mabebe?
I cannot recall. whether they have identified them or not, through the investigations or through the police investigation.
Yes.
Because again, that was an SAPS investigation now, so Lonman would have been, the Lonman security would have been very careful to not infringe on that.
Yes. Now, I'm interested in more in the footage, Mr. Sinclair, whether there was any useful footage from that.
I don't recall that. I stand corrected, but I don't believe that that Lonman security have identified any people in this or that footage, Mr. Chair.
And the next attack that we have, that I'm interested in, is the attack on Mr. Langa on the 13th, early in the morning. This is the employee that was on the way to work, we have been told.
Is that the one at Eastern Platinum?
I think it is.
That's the one near the railway line at Eastern Platinum. Yes. Okay.
Yes, that's the one. Now, Mr. Buertes was asked questions about it by Mr. Chaskalson about whether that incident was captured on CCTV and whether it could have been captured. And his answer, in short, was that it was dark. It couldn't be. There wasn't any CCTV footage of that incident. Couldn't pick it up. Are you aware of that?
I don't know the time of the incident, but certainly I would concur with Mr. Buerter, where my knowledge of where the cameras are placed and their capabilities, that if it was dark, and obviously I need to
about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Then definitely our cameras, these cameras, are not night vision cameras. They would not have been able to get that. And from my understanding, that I never visited that scene personally, but from my understanding, that was too far away from our cameras based at the Eastern Platinum hostel area. So.
Thank you, Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Wesley, who's going to cross-examine next?
Chair, what remains is Noom and Mrs. Fundi for half an hour, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as you've heard, Mr. Sinclair, I'll be putting some questions to you on behalf of Noom and also on behalf of Mrs. Fundi. And there will not be many topics. Time is against us a little. But I want to deal with a general subject, first of all, and that is what we have debated at some length with your colleague, Mr. Blow, and is accepted, I think, as being an inherently important part of security planning, namely what has been described as comprehensive scenario planning. Would you concur that that is an important factor?
I'm sorry, I just didn't understand. Could you just ask me the question again, please?
Yes, with pleasure. Let me take it step by step. When one has the duty to plan security arrangements, then it is essential to examine the situation, to examine the mood of the various role players, and to give very careful consideration to the various possibilities that may arise. Would you agree with that?
That is a good way of sorting out security issues, with a couple of things attached to that. Depending on the circumstances, depending on the time available, and the resources available, as to what depth that is done. But certainly that is, you would try and follow those steps, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. That's fairly put. And why I use the phrase comprehensive scenario planning is because that phrase was used in the ICAM report, and I take it that you're familiar with the ICAM report, not in every detail, but overall what it dealt with.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's the ICAM report. I think that was one of the other documents that I needed to look at, or somebody told me I needed to look at. So I have paged through it.
Yes.
Could I have your question, please, sir, again?
Yes. I think to assist you, let me call up a page of that ICAM report. No. Is it?
One for the 11th
It is,
11th of
quadruple
August.
R 2.2.
Yes.
Now, just familiarise yourself. I'm going to ask the operator in a moment just to scroll down. But this is the document that you would have seen, the ICAM report that was compiled as a result of the investigations that were done into the incidents in August 2012 and some of the incidents thereafter, as you see, August to November 2012. You're familiar with what you're looking at, Mr. Sinclair?
Yeah. Yes, I am, sir.
Yes, thank you. Then let us just scroll to page 12, please. That is a page that was compiled, obviously, by the authors of the report, and evidently with the intention that a person picking up the report would give, would see that as attracting particular prominence in the thinking of those who did the report. You follow me?
I'm listening, sir.
Yes, good. And the subject matter that is identified there is absent and failed defences, which we understand, and Mr. Blow confirmed, is a reference to what was lacking in the response of Lonman to the situation, difficult situation that unfolded in the course of the period that is being examined. Would you concur with that?
There were definitely absence and failed defences that were after the incidents when the inquiry was going on that were highlighted.
Yes, thank you. And the one that I particularly want to draw to your attention, and you've probably read it as we're speaking, paragraph 2, what is identified as an absent or failed defence is the following. I quote, comprehensive scenario planning not conducted and embedded across the operations, which is risk-based and details tactical actions. I suppose that language would be familiar to you?
It is familiar to me, sir.
Yes. In short, what the compilers are highlighting here is that there was not comprehensive scenario planning, which was risk-based and which detailed the tactical actions that ought to have been implemented by the security. Would that be a fair description of it?
Mr. Chair, that is the view of the team that was sitting together and had compiled the comprehensive document. There were aspects of that although they compiled that and to their belief collected the information and put it down and put this in, there were a couple of stages in the completion of this ICAM that would have dealt with those 3 points. The one would have been a review of the ICAM team with the security management team. Now, that, I know this document was put out, and I don't remember when it came to there. I got a partial view of I got this sent to me, all those details of the views, and there were reasons how we came to dealing with mainly the 4 issues there to give us an overall picture of what the absent and failed things were and the other things that we would need to look at. We never went back and reviewed this with that team, to the best of my knowledge, although Henry Blow was responsible together with Jock Erasmus, to deal with this ICAM. I don't believe that the investigators, sat with them to verify whether they had detected that as a correct and comprehensive absent and failed defence. So I don't believe we went to that review. I stand corrected, but I certainly don't believe we went to that. So when I understand your question is, should that be taking place? Yes, it should be taking place in any security scenarios, time and the things that I've already mentioned. Did it take place? To my knowledge, there was a great deal of scenario planning based on risks and tactical options that did take place. Now, where the missing is between this point number 2 and what I'm telling you, I haven't analyzed, and I've actually parked the conversation deliberately while I'm under oath and giving here to go back and address this once I'm released from this, because I believe sincerely that there is a part of the detail that should have been done. I don't know if it was done. I haven't been able to ask, and it probably would have a slightly different outcome on these 3 points if it had been done.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. You'll doubtless find it interesting when you do undertake that exercise of going back. But let me just put very crisply, if I can, the proposition to you that there were indeed very serious shortcomings in the planning, the scenario planning, in the course of the days at least 10, 11, and 12 August 2012. Would you accept that there were such shortcomings?
Mr. Chairman, I would accept that under the rapid and changing conditions that we were placed under, with things that we had never anticipated. We had never anticipated the violence, the levels of violence. We had never anticipated that security had never, to my knowledge, been attacked, with the exception of, I remember briefing you on the Bapong things where we used with the vehicles, with scenario planning and how we did. That was the only time security had actually ever been attacked. So there were definitely things that just transpired in such a rapid way that, yes, we would have missed some of the steps by sitting and documenting, by pulling teams in, because we were a small team deployed across a vast area, and we were totally taken by things that were transpiring. So certainly we would have missed some scenario planning. Scenario planning would have been done. We would have missed some risks. Risks would have been analyzed. We definitely would have done those. If I can answer, and I don't know, Mr. Chair, if that has answered the question, sir.
Would you say,
sorry?
Would you say that because of the circumstances, that the scenario planning that was done was not as comprehensive as it ought to have been?
Mr. Chair, on all the previous unrests and things we would have had scenario planning and risk things, and we had a system. That was the system that we explained. On the boards, writing on the whiteboards, writing on the things, we would have had a system where we got together and we did, and we had managed well up until that stage. But because of these circumstances, we were stretched to our limits. We were placed with things that we had not anticipated, and we couldn't really just go by what we had traditionally been doing effectively in this circumstance. So yes, I'm sure that we made quite a few or omitted things in that, not deliberately, because we were a very conscientious team. But definitely we would have omitted, and looking back, we need to go and review that. And I think it has, and I would categorize it has been reviewed. And if I could just go one step further, I don't want to delay, but this recent 5-month disruption that we had, everything was done completely differently to what we had before the 12th to the 16th, and then over the 12th to the 16th and to now. Yes, I think if that was the question, and I hope I haven't overextended, but I think that there were things missing, and we needed to move forward in that and get it right.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. I'm going to leave the broad overview type question at that point,
Yes,
and ask you to look at one or two specific instances, which I will do by examining with you quadruple R 2.4. I suppose that you recognize that, Mr. Sinclair, as being a timeline of a series of timelines that were prepared and form part of the ICAM investigation and report.
It's the first part of an ICAM report, to my understanding.
That's correct, yes. And if we could look at page 2, and you will see there in the second column, Mr. Sinclair, and I'll just read down if you follow me as I do so. A call was, this is, I must point out first of all, that this is time dated 11 August, in other words, the Saturday, and you'll recall that there was an attack on the K4 shaft at about 9 o'clock on the Sunday, 12 August. That sequence is before you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we're looking at Saturday, and reading down from the top in that column, a call was made to the shaft mine overseer of K4 shaft by a Lonmin employee to inform him of an attack that will be carried out on K4 shaft on Sunday night. The employee were informed about the attack by people planning the attack. The employee had a good relationship with the mine overseer as they worked together previously. And then in column 3, again from the top, the mine overseer confirmed with the employee that he informed security about the planned attack, to alert security in time about the planned attack, for security to be prepared for the possible attack. And I'll stop reading at that point. Now, this is a very specific record by the ICAM investigators of this report, which, as I have identified, was conveyed to the mine overseer, and as noted there, was evidently also conveyed to security as at the afternoon of Saturday. Now, there appears not to have been any reaction from the security establishment to this early warning of an intended attack on K4 shaft on the Sunday evening. You follow what I'm putting to you?
So your last words, there appears to be?
There appears not to have been any reaction from within the Lonmin security establishment to this early warning of what was evidently intended by some of the strikers to take place on the Sunday evening, namely that K4 shaft would be attacked. Do you follow? Now, the question that has arisen in these proceedings, Mr. Sinclair, and I'd be glad if you can assist us, is A, whether you have any knowledge from your position as the ultimate head of security and emergency management of this report having been fed into the security information network, And B, if you have no knowledge of that, and if it appears that it was not acted upon, whether there has been an investigation subsequently into why there was no reaction. I've put a few things together in that one question. If it would assist you for me to break them up, I'll do so, but if you followed me, then please let us have your response.
Just give me your questions on B again, please.
Yes,
so
B.
It's no knowledge.
Whether if indeed it is so that there was no recorded knowledge within security or response from security to this information, whether that in itself, as an apparent shortcoming of very serious extent, was investigated to find out why there had not been a response to this very important information. Again, let me ask you whether that's all clear, because I know that there's quite a lot of content there.
Okay, sir. I will, if I could just go through step by step. Mr. Chairman, firstly, just the comments that are in the ICAM report. They are not the information to inform him that the attack will be carried out on K4 shaft. K4 shaft and the surrounding area is a huge area. So I just want to highlight that point. K4 shaft is also, with it being specified that they are planning an attack on K4 shaft, it is extensively security fenced. It has extensive lighting. It has extensive things, and those, so where the employer is saying on K4 shaft, whereabouts, is it on the road, coming to the shaft, is it at
Sinclair, you'll forgive me for interrupting you, but you are, with respect, just directing your answer towards the circumstances at K4 shaft.
Oh.
And although those are important, my questions are directed very specifically to the aspect of what happened to this information.
So
that is where the question goes.
So that's, thank you.
Was the information acted upon? And if not, has that fact, namely the failure to react, been investigated?
And so, Mr. Chairman, sorry that I needed to just say that because I felt it was important. So has the information been acted on? Who received that report? Was it just the security guard at the shaft? I can't say. And was it there? I don't have knowledge here, as I sit, of this report coming through. However, it could have come through to the structures we have in place, the security managers out at the units. It could have come through to the roving managers. It could have come through to the call center. Whether it is recorded in the minutes, I don't know. So I personally do not recall whether this personally came through and was highlighted to me in that process that I was explaining with the scenario planning and that with the overwhelming things that came through. I do not recall having knowledge of this coming through until well after the time. Does that answer part A of your question?
It does, yes. If you could deal briefly with part B, Mr. Sinclair, that I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Sure.
B, let me just repeat. B is whether the fact that there was no apparent response to this information has itself been investigated as a shortcoming. In other words, to whom did this information come? Why was it not acted upon?
Okay.
That in itself is a point of inquiry to see what went wrong.
So I cannot say whether Henry has taken it up. I definitely did not see it for quite a while afterwards. So I didn't take it up. Was it taken up by Henry? But what I am very aware of was that the scenario planning in the lead up of after the Sunday morning attack, scenario planning around all the shafts, including K4, we very specifically placed our people where we believed we were vulnerable at K3, along the road to K4, and around the area. So there was definitely a reaction in that area, and I know that because I have reviewed deployments. I recall reviewing deployments that we were out in that area. So there was a reaction, whether it was because of this comment from the mine overseer on the 11th, there was a reaction to security in that area and scenario. Exactly what it took from Dirk Boters, from Henry, from the people who were undertaking this, I cannot say, sir. Does that answer your question, sir?
Partly, Mr. Sinclair. I think just for the record, I must put to you that there is evidence that the situation at K4 Shaft on the Sunday evening was in no respect any different from what it had been previously, and that there was indeed no protection for employees there. I'll put that to you. If you have a brief comment, please make it.
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Yes.
There was?
The evidence that has been placed before the Commission thus far is that the situation at K4 Shaft at the time of the attack at approximately 9 o'clock on Sunday evening, the 12th of August, was no different from what it normally was, meaning that there was no additional security there, and meaning, more importantly, that there was no effective protection whatsoever for employees who came to work at that shaft that evening.
Mr. Chair, I cannot agree with that. Firstly, the shaft itself, we had spent a huge amount of time, effort, and then securing the shaft, the inside, the working for employees, with lighting, with cameras, with gate access, with all of those. There was also an effort on our stretched resources of getting patrols through the vulnerable area between K4 and K3 on the roads to protect employees, because that's traditionally where the attacks had taken place. The one in the ICAM of April 2012, where one of our colleagues were brutally assaulted on his way to work through remote areas. So we were very aware that those attacks are along those dark remote areas, because the shaft itself was well fenced, well lit, cameras, additional CCTV was activated, and we were monitoring as much as we could with additional monitoring. So a whole lot was done to secure not just K4, but all the shafts across the property, from Eastern Platts right the way through to K4, which is an extensive area, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Sinclair, there was one lady security officer who was deployed to the access control where the boom entrance is. We've seen a statement from her.
Mr. Chair, to my understanding, and I do stand to be corrected, that there was the deployment of the 6 officers at K4. There was also, because of and they had duties, and I don't know what their duties are, they would have been dealt with by the people responsible to ensure that they were effective. There were also roving patrols, and I know that I had, during the course of the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, ensured that the roving patrols that visited regularly were on a regular basis. They were in place, and that, to the best of my knowledge, when I was talking with the vice presidents during the Saturday and Sunday, that the positions of who's going to be at work? Are there limited people? Do we have an assembly process in place for those people who are going to work? So those had all been considered. Whether it was recorded correctly, I cannot say, but I'm certain that there were those patrols of those people in. I don't understand how there was, out of that I've just explained, that there was one lady by herself. I don't know where I've missed that in the past, but there was definitely more than that, and there was a limited team at the shaft with all the other infrastructure that I've in place to assist with security, including the access from K3 to K4, which is a substantial road. I think it's about 2.5 kilometers through a very dark and a bushy area. Those were in place, ma'am. Sorry.
Well, the docket that relates to the investigation of this incident, if you read the statements there was one lady stationed there. She asked the 2 other gentlemen security officers to remain with her because she was afraid at that stage. That is what is contained in the docket. But all 3 of them were not stationed at the access control point.
No,
to
they weren't
K4
all,
shaft.
I don't know where they were stationed, ma'am. They would have been stationed by the managers responsible for that. The contract managers and the mine managers would have worked out where they should best be stationed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Sinclair, I just want to go on to a different topic, partly because of time limitations.
Yes, sir.
And I want to take you to one of your briefing.
Sorry, Mr. Vice, it's now almost 12 o'clock. I was proposing to take the tea adjournment now.
Yes.
Let's take it now, and then you can move on to your new topic.
That would be convenient, Chair. Thank you.
Call now.
Should be a different